everybody, Car and Biker here. Just out for a quick ride with Graham. He's just had his bike repaired. We both missed out on a ride last night in beautiful sunshine. Me because I was too blooming tired, and Graham because his bike wouldn't start. And he tried to call me, but because I was so tired and I'd just finished being on call, so it wasn't my turn to be on call anymore, I was quite happy to finish work, leave the phone on my desk, go and have my tea, and then just kind of, well, not do a lot. And then because I knew I wasn't going out for a ride last night, we went shopping last night, so I could come out tonight. And that meant that when Graham rang me, my phone was on my desk and I never heard him. I didn't get to see his messages until about midnight when I was going to bed, so unfortunately I couldn't help him out, which was a shame. But anyway, he's got it all fixed now. It turned out his battery was underpowered, so these videos in the past where he's talked about having a bike that was a struggle to start sometimes, may well be that he actually had a battery out of a 125 in it. And I thought I wanted to talk about, or ask about, motorcycle myths. We all know there are loads of myths around riding a motorbike. For example, the myth that you can't brake in a bend. If you think you can't use your brakes in a bend, or your front brake in a bend, I've heard said, or you can't emergency stop whilst in a bend, it's certainly something you should be out and learning how to do and practicing, because if you ever go around a bend and find a tractor stopped just out of sight, you might need that. But the reason I wanted to talk about motorbike myths is a video I was watching the other night, and it was by a video channel that I can never remember quite right, but it's something like AntiPiloteDeLigneDroite or something. AntiPiloteDeLigneDroite. I think it's French. And it was one that made me think, that's very interesting. When you first learn to ride, well, when I first did my CBD, they didn't really say much. They kind of went, brake there, clutch there, gears there. Off you go, let's try turning around a bit. Look over your shoulder when you're doing a U-turn, that kind of thing. Didn't really talk about much more than that. Later on, I think mainly through watching YouTube videos, it was kind of understanding rather than just naturally doing counter steering came up. And people always like to bust the myth of steering, that you can't steer by leaning, you can only steer by counter steering. So I want to turn right, I push right. I want to turn left at this next one, I'm going to push on my left hand bar like that, and I'll go left. And then there's lots of myths about how that works. I had somebody on my old counter steering video telling me that when you push right, and I said, well, you push right, your bike steers left a bit and then tips. And I got told, no, it doesn't. And it does. If you ever need me to prove that, stick a comment in and I'll set something up and prove it. But this video was kind of the other way. It was kind of not setting out to do it, but doing it anyway, disproving the myth that you have to counter steer, which was a very interesting one, and people will no doubt get upset about it and not believe it. But AntiPiloteDeLigneDroite, I shall stop talking for a minute while I sit at these lights. He does a lot of the Moto Gymkhana type skills, so the car park skills where you're doing not fast but not slow, certainly fast enough to be counter steering, not slow enough to be trying to steer around corners, but that whipping round corners, really tight corners really quickly with fairly extreme lean angles considering the speeds involved. And he was trying to show, because this guy does training, if I was over in France, I think it is, I would love to go and do this training. But he does this training, and he was showing that you don't need to counter steer to do these tight bends, and he was proving the fact that you don't need to by doing these kind of extreme lean bends without using the bars at all. To prove that he wasn't using the bars, he didn't have his hands on them. And it's been a while now. I mean, at the beginning of my riding experience, it was quite often that I would see one of these myths busted. But it's been quite a while since I've been surprised in that way by how much control somebody could have to steer a bike without using the bars. And that meant not only not using the bars, but of course not using the front brake, not using the clutch, not using the throttle. He's probably got his idle turned right up to keep the speed up, but not using any of those controls, and doing all these tight turns and some slow manoeuvres, and balancing the whole thing just by leaning and using the rear brake. But it did make me wonder, what other myths might I have missed? So I've already mentioned the braking in a corner. I've mentioned now the not actually needing to counter steer necessarily. I've mentioned that counter steering does steer you the wrong way before it steers you the right way, and say some people believe that's not the case. There are other ones like some people think the front brake is dangerous. Never quite understood that one. The back brake isn't as powerful as the front brake is pretty true on most bikes, but that you can't use the back brake for an emergency stop, I've heard. Quite an interesting one when I did the Eye-to-Eye Motorcycle Academy training with that one, doing very hard stops with the rear brake and stopping faster because the throttle's open. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, that you should be accelerating but you're actually stopping faster than if you just close the throttle and use the rear brake. Well, that's, if you've never tried it, it's an interesting one to try. It's really good if you need to do a fairly fast stop with a pillion passenger, because rather than the front end squatting and the back end going up, the back end squats, and it's much more comfortable for your passenger. It's not emergency stop territory though, so don't try it in an emergency. But what other myths would you say? What's your favourite motorcycling myth? I'd be interested if you've got a myth that's fairly outlandish to common sense, because common sense doesn't really go very far in the physics of motorbikes. But if you've got one that's fairly outlandish, pointing me at some evidence, maybe something I can go and practice, because when you overcome these myths, you open up opportunities for improving your riding. So what's your favourite myth? Or your favourite top 3? Or as many as you want to put? Let me know in them there comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. Ride safe and stay safe in this blooming pandemic. And I'll talk to you all again soon.